Thanks, everyone. Well, yes, I was going to say, we've reached that point in the day where I, in the interest of balance, am going to bring the tone right down. I mean, we've just heard how exciting and how bright the future is with conversational commerce, all the exciting things. And yes, I'm going to talk about that dark, seedy underside of security. So, what I really want to be covering is what are we seeing right now, today, in the market on RCS. First off, who needs to be secured? I mean, it's one thing to jump straight in to say, look, there are issues, there are attacks, here's screenshots, but let's first off put some framework on this. What's the context? Who needs to be secured? And what we can see in the RCS, RBM infrastructure is that there's a whole range of folks. We have, of course, the users. We have, of course, the mobile networks. We now have the RBM providers. We have aggregators and CPaaS acting in actually now quite a different role. And, of course, we've got the brands themselves as well who are responsible for driving a lot of this engagement. But the attacks, what are they? Are they the same or are they changing? Well, we're seeing a lot of the same usual sort of issues of things like traffic injection, bypass, phishing attacks, etc. But with the rich capabilities that we get through RCS, we are seeing people jumping on board and leveraging that. So we're seeing things like injection of malware. We saw flu bot attacks just a couple of years ago on the back of MMS. People are loving the fact with RCS they can pop a file on there and push that out to people. We're seeing people leveraging the fact that you can put rich media. Hey, it's a great way of engaging products that maybe not be appropriate or legal to push out to markets. So we're seeing the RCS channel being enthusiastically embraced by both that murkier side of the business as well as, of course, many legitimate businesses. And when we look at who is involved in trying to deliver protection for this, we again get this even more complex environment. So yes, we've got users, mobile networks, operators, aggregators, CPaaS, but then we also get the involvement of the regulators. They have opinions on what should be done and what the responsibilities of each party should be in that. We've also got industry organizations. We have the MEF, but we also are now getting greater involvement from other external industries. For example, the financial community, they are getting very interested, very motivated on how to deliver a better, safer experience for their customers on services like banking, etc. So we've got a lot more folks getting involved in the conversation, wanting to ensure that it's, again, a good, clean, safe experience for users. We also have the involvement of things like the mobile device manufacturers. They are playing now an increasingly more important role, and even the messaging app providers have a responsibility in this mix. So what we've got is we've moved up from having a fairly straightforward environment where predominantly a lot of the controls were placed either in the network by the mobile operator or in the CPaaS environment, to now an environment where we've got a lot more players, all of whom need to start getting involved in this for security. And why do they need to be involved? Well, let's look at the user experience. What is it looking like today for a mobile user? And I've got to say, what I'm putting up here on the screen is not some mocked up sort of this is what it could look like. This is actually my phone from just about a couple of weeks ago. I thought I'd open it up. I use an Android device. It's got a spam folder. Anything that makes it through all of the protections in the network ends up in this folder. And what you can see is there's quite a few things in there. I'm getting about maybe 15, 20 spam messages a year. That's not a bad level, but it's still things that are getting through all those protections. So if we start to look at these in turn, like this top one here, this is a case of, standard scam where they're saying, hey, the government have got free money, just click on the links, give us your details, and we'll send you £3,000. I keep clicking, I still haven't seen the money. Important thing is, look at this top thing, RCS chat. The scammers are using RCS. If we look at another one, we can see that in this instance, RCS chat, in fact, in this instance, it's my parking ticket that's not paid. Spammers are saying, hey, hold on, we've got this channel that is enabling us to reach users at scale. Potentially I can use images to look more legitimate. And even better, it's encrypted. fantastic. I've now got a way of reaching a victim in a way that it makes it hard for people to protect against. So the spammers are seeing RCS as being a great channel to reach their users. And I put you this screenshot up here on the first slide. One thing you may not have spotted is look at all those little bubbles there. That indicates it was an RCS conversation. Every single spam message that I personally received was RCS. They're not bothering with SMS anymore. They have got this channel, it's encrypted, it's a great way to get through to end users. So yes, we are seeing that RCS is a channel that has to be cleaned, it has to be better protected today. What we're also seeing is they're actually getting really quite creative. SMS, at the end of the day, it used to come from a short code, toll-free number, or a long number. With RCS, you can do group conversations. The nice thing about a group conversation is you can give it a name. You can therefore start to get users, again, sort of more lulled into a false sense of security. So, for example, in this instance, it's the Canadian Post Association. It makes it look more realistic. You're more likely to get victims to respond. And when we start to look at techniques that people are using, I mean, we've seen things like a broad range of additional characters now and additional top-level domains, like this top-left example here. They're using extended Cyrillic and Greek character sets to try and create new URL domains. We're seeing some quite creative messages like here where they're saying, remove the bracket symbols to get to a URL. The simple techniques of look for a link in a message and then check if it's good. You've got to get more sophisticated. They're trying to get users to get around the simple defenses. We're seeing more extensive techniques like that here in the middle where they're saying now sort of add these words together to create a domain. Really creative ones here. This particular example comes from a country where the regulator says, you know what, we're going to get in front of the spammers, we're going to stop and prevent anyone sending a link in a message. All they're saying now is just use a search term in a favorite search engine to get to our website. So they're being incredibly creative when it comes to how can you get around defenses. But my favorite of this section here on the right, I mean, we had your question, I wanted to jump up and answer, are people using RCS for conversational spam? Yes. In fact, I would say that, in every instance, whenever there's new services, people always look, how can I leverage it? And conversational interaction on RCS by spammers is jumping through the roof because they're finding it is a great way to engage in people, and they are doing it at scale. This is examples of what's called conversational pig butchering. Horrible phrase, but what they want to do is engage people in discussion. So it's very innocuous statements. These don't look like spam messages, but how are you? Do I know you? Where are you located? They get a response back. They've got somebody starting to engage in a relationship. You get the discussion going. You potentially move them to another channel. You then try and get them to invest in crypto or exchange details. But these things, they have a process flow, but we strongly believe they're using things like chatbots to try and automate that at scale and across multiple languages. So yes, we are starting to see conversational interactions and campaigns being run by scammers and spammers. And frankly, I think, actually, let's take that and recognize that it's a positive for the industry that if they're doing it, they're getting a payback. The opportunity really is there that conversational interactions by legitimate brands really does reward. It can create those stronger relationships. But we do have to guard against them being misused because they are today being exploited. And I mentioned earlier, the fact that we've got this rich media attachments. We are seeing, again, the usage of that. So from creating images of text, we have here on the left-hand side, to on the right-hand side, this is actually a menu for narcotics. It's pseudo-legitimate business, questionable as to whether it's actually permitted in certain environments. But yeah, it's a way of being able to share a large amount of information very concisely in a single message. And again, from the responsibility of compliancy, Somebody somewhere has to be now inspecting this to say, is this allowed, is this appropriate, and can this be shared to that recipient in this environment and on this channel? Likewise, in the middle here, we're seeing it being used for promotional activities. Again, could be entirely legitimate, or it might be in certain countries, certain jurisdictions, that this type of thing cannot be shared. So when I was saying about who has what responsibility in the ecosystem, we're now seeing a greater obligation to start scanning and detecting these sorts of behaviors and say, is this allowed, is this appropriate to these destinations? So what we're really seeing then is, as we say up here, a potential for a perfect storm. Folks are starting to use offensive AI. They're able to use this to generate, first off, personalization. So many people's information, like first name and phone number and potentially sort of zip code, are out there in the public domain, that they're able to create campaigns to say, hey, Bob, hey, John, hey, Sue, at this location, anything that tries to create a greater level of response from a victim. They're able to do it, say, in multiple languages. That means they can do it at scale across many different countries and territories. They're able to have these personalized engagements to follow up that conversation. And when they combine that with the rich media and the ability to do things like embedded links or embedded callbacks in RCS, it creates a better response to a spam campaign. And I said earlier that we've got this end-to-end encryption. What that means is that if somebody can get onto a handset, they can use that handset itself to reach anyone. So we do see things like malware starting to pick up, where once you've got on a device, that device's connection to everybody else can be leveraged. They can use SIM banks. We've seen people also use emulators to try and create connections to get reach there. We've also seen credential theft. When it's not just linked to a SIM card, but maybe just username and password to send. We've seen people use approaches like this to try and get that reach, to get that legitimacy. But, encryption can be a good thing. It certainly gives confidentiality, it gives integrity to the connection, it prevents people from intercepting it. These are all real problems we have with SMS. But, as I say, it comes with the downside that you can't prevent that malicious user engagement. If a connection is encrypted, you have no mechanism to ensure that the party on one side is actually well-intentioned when they're talking to somebody else. And I think that is a bit of a challenge that, as an industry, we need to recognize and try and find ways to approach it. It's not impossible, but it does require a different mindset and a different approach to what we had with SMS. Traditionally, mobile network operator would have been the primary point of defense. Most operators have a firewall, whether it be from ourselves or any one of a number of companies. That was a control point where the operator could inspect all messaging before it hits their end user. And the reason that most of them did that is the regulator is telling them, hey, you're providing the connection, you're providing the airtime, you have the responsibility to the user, you're providing the service, from the user's perspective of SMS. That doesn't change in terms of responsibility with RCS, but when the communication is now encrypted from point of origin right the way through to the user's handset, it does mean that these folks in the middle are getting cut out of the ability to deliver that protection. So somebody somewhere has to now step up to do that. So we are starting to see, again, a greater focus on, for example, RCS aggregators, CPaaS, delivering that point of inspection and control where it's an RBM message. I think when it comes an RCS P2P message, we've again got to look for different techniques. You've probably all seen on your phone now, we've got the report spam function. If you get a message that pops up from someone you don't recognize, it's like, do you want to delete and report junk, or do you want to block and report spam? That function is going to become really important as we move forward, because that's really probably the only intelligence feedback point we have now in this whole connection of encrypted communication. It tells us what they were trying to send, and it tells us where they come from. So if we can share that intelligence, it potentially enables us to start controlling the point of origin. But that will require a change in mindset by operators, by the legal teams on information sharing. It will require a mindset change in terms of disclosure and who has what responsibility to act upon that. Things can't carry on and say, well, there is a definite change in the status quo as a result of the encryption of communication. It's really important that we start to recognize that and get ahead. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a messaging channel where the end user is poisoned in that experience. Now, they're going to go into that inbox and they're going to see bad communication in there, which means they're going to be reticent to trust what is in there. And we are seeing scams, we are seeing phishing, we are seeing inappropriate content, and we're also seeing things like grey root move on to RCS. I guess the upside is we haven't ourselves yet seen AIT on RCS, so hopefully, that's on RBM. But we are seeing grey roots. I mean, we had Nick Lane present numbers earlier this morning saying that, this is a financial threat to the ecosystem. This is what it looks like. They're setting up, again, group chats, so you've got the brand name at the top. They're sending out codes, and then they're dropping from that. This is on P2P. The operator is not getting monetized appropriately for this type of message. So this will be a revenue threat to the ecosystem if this is not addressed. And then also, when we start to look at the behaviors of what the user experience is today, I thought I'd put this up. So in the interest of disclosure, this is going back to SMS. This is not RCS here. But this is, in a particular market, a view of what's the user experience on how brands are contacting them. And I appreciate every market is very different. But in this instance, we've got the scenario where one brand is having multiple shortcodes being used for their connectivity to users. So we've actually got one bank with 112 different identities, different shortcodes being used for their communication. One single organization with 112 identities. We've got TikTok with 92 different identities, another bank with 41. And it's not just that, we've got the reverse problem as well of shared shortcode, where we're seeing, for example, this shortcode here, with all of these different organizations all being sent from the same identity. The users is going to get so confused as to which brand they're engaging with here. And if we start to think about what does it look like from their perspective, you've got a message saying, your PIN code is, that's great, I was expecting that. They've now got a message that's saying, you've gone into overdraft. It's like, oh, okay. Now got a message saying, click on the link. Okay, well, I've just gone into overdraft. Is that helping me? But what if that third message on that same conversation thread was coming from a spammer? I know the first and the second message was legitimate. I'm going to trust that third message. So it is utterly critical that we identify these behaviors. But the opportunity is that with RBM, we can address that with verified sender. So let's use the intelligence that we're gaining from security on SMS and say, let's target those businesses first off to say, you need to move to RBM. This is your user's experience right now, either 112 identities for one bank, or you've got one code with 90-odd different brands. Either way, it's bad. They can't tell who they're working with. With RBM, you get one logo, you get your icon up there, you get your nice blue verified tick. It's safe, it's trusted. So let's use security intelligence to identify who we need to engage with and what the value proposition is. Now, this has got huge, immediate, visible benefits to that brand. So there are a range of challenges on RCS, absolutely. Let's not say it's encrypted, all our problems have gone away. But these are challenges that can be addressed and that does create opportunities. We've seen them using conversational commerce for their advantage, but it proves that conversations can create great relationships that people respond to. that again is a great lesson back for us to say these things have got so much future, so much potential, but we need to leverage insights on what people are doing today. We need to change our stance and approach on security, and we need to be thinking about making this a better, safer experience. So what I've been presenting today comes as a result of the fact that we are doing this, well, we've got about 2.9 billion subscribers under protection. No, this is not theoretical. This is real traffic examples that we're seeing today. But, we can help you. Please do talk to, whether it be ourselves or your current security provider, but start that conversation going. What needs to change as a result of the traffic that is moving and changing today?
Hi, Simeon. Great presentation. Why do you think they're moving from SMS to RCS?
Well, first one is the protections that are in place today on SMS don't exist and can't exist on RCS. So that's one of the biggest reasons. So
you're saying SMS is a more protected channel than RCS?
It absolutely is, yeah. Because most operators now have a firewall to be able to protect user in that last point of engagement. With RCS, it's encrypted. It punches straight through their network.
And you showed those examples of the British government sending you RCS messages. Where's the security at the top of that funnel? Who allows them to send that? There's an RCS provider, there's an operator. How are they able to do that?
Yeah, so in those British government examples, that was just a user who was pretending to be British government. They got a group chat going, so they were able to name it as whatever they wanted, and they were sending it as a P2P message through. But the end user receiving it, the victim, has no visibility that it's actually P2P rather than RBM.
So it wasn't an RBM?
It wasn't RBM, okay. Yeah, so there was no sort of verified sender, no tick. But that's the thing, though, the user experience is close enough unless we educate them. Yep, we've got another question here.
This is Inderpal Mamik from .go. As you look at the security issues with RCS, especially P2P, how do you envision these problems being solved or being managed so that people's trust in RCS business messages continues to grow and the channel grows?
Yeah, so two answers. First answer is for an RBM flow. I think it puts the responsibility really on the people creating the message, so really the onboarding CPaaS at that point, because at every point downstream everything is encrypted, so nobody has the ability of doing any more control at that point. For an RCS message, so the scenario we were just describing there earlier, it feels like the responsibility is on the terminating operator sharing intelligence reports and working with the community to then try and address the point of origin. Because the only things you can do in that sort of flow is say, who sent that message, stop them sending any more messages. You can't inspect the content. There's no ability now to do content screening of that message in transit. So really the only thing at that point now to do is to just say that source was clearly doing something harmful and fraudulent. I need to actually restrict their ability and their limits to do that. And there are mechanisms in RCS to do that. So, control through entitlement service and things like that. But it does require, this is a change, it requires the terminating operator to collate those fraud and abuse reports and then share it with the appropriate points in origin to disconnect that service. And that really does summarize the problem we've got. No longer can operators deploy a firewall and have that level of control. Yeah, we've got another question. Yeah. Run, Susan.
You got the question? Oh, hi. And I think it's important to understand that there's no more SMS on P2P. There is only RCS. So when you get an RCS that is spam, you need to know that this is not a company. This is a SIM firm using residential SIMs. So this is why you get RCS. But it is not that there is a spam on RBM yet. And regarding the spam reports, you have this action that you can tell, report spam and all that. Operators do not have this info, and this is a problem. This info goes directly to Google, and maybe when you get some certain number of spams, they tell the operator to advise the company to change the message and all that. But we cannot share, operators cannot share the info of this is a spam, I got these stats, we don't have it.
And that exactly is the problem. I completely agree. I think, so, yeah, again, sort of two answers to your second question. Absolutely, in terms of who has what insight. So yes, I think the operators can get those security feedback reports. They do need to engage with Google and Apple to get those sent to them. But it does require engagement. We are deployed in a number of environments where they are getting that feed on RCS, MMS, and SMS. But it's again a change in relationship there to get that. And then secondly, the sort of the correlating point of having comfort in the ability to share those reports back to the source. And again, appreciate that is a change that needs a legal team to support and endorse that approach. And I think, yeah, your first question or first statement is we are not seeing spam ourselves on RBM yet, and partly because the spammers don't need to go on RBM. You know, they can go on RCS with a SIM bank or a SIM emulator, and that gives them, you know, an ability to go encrypted end-to-end. So it's actually more beneficial for them to use RCS than RBM, because at RBM they will be suffered from security and insight and templating and control and compliancy checks.
So the solution is to educate the ecosystem then. So when a brand goes into RCS, they must tell the user, this is how I'm gonna communicate with you from now on. So if you receive an SMS, what they believe is an SMS, do not click. So it's part of the plan to educate all the users, and this is a work from the community. So if you get an SMS, you think it's an SMS, but it's an RCS, do not click, because it is not branded, and there's tons of work to do, but the thing is to educate everyone so they know what they are getting.
Yes, and I think we achieve education. It's about educating the brands rather than the end users. I think we have to show the brands the behaviors and the customer experience today, because I think quite a few of them are probably not aware. For, you know, the examples I showed on the shared shortcode there, they're probably just not aware of how their identity is perceived by the end user. But if we can get them to say, hey, I have to have verified sender, then the users become conditioned to seeing that blue check mark. And it's actually then just like we all went through on the web, that, you know, the first thing we used to look for was that little padlock symbol. You know, we weren't necessarily educated yet. There was a bit of media talk, but it was almost through habit and repeated use that people ended up going, you know what, I'm not going to trust a website if it doesn't have a padlock. It takes a number of years, but it feels like we got to go through that same learning curve with RCS RBM. And again, it's using examples like I showed there as education back to the brand to show them you have to use verified sender. This is the benefit, and these are the risks if you don't.
Hi, it's me again. I'm concerned that we're going to be back here in 6-7 years and we're talking about the launch of RCS into the market, and we'll see all of this abuse on the channel, and then we'll have to have working groups and discussions about how we're going to prevent that little loophole of the fact that there's no filter at the end before it goes to the... So what are we going to do? Are we going to start proposing to Google that they have to put in filters at the terminating network in order to prevent that from happening? How are we going to make sure that we don't come back here 6 to 7 years later to have that conversation? What are we going to do now to stop it?
Yeah, I would say, given it's end-to-end encrypted, you know, we're seeing so many, you know, other privacy aspects being played out, they're going to say, we can't see, we can't inspect, we can't control those messages. I mean, yes, they will do things on the handset, once it's been received post-encryption. The things I showed you earlier, they actually were in my spam folder, so fair play to them. They're actually doing a pretty good job on their handsets on catching it. But everyone, not just Google, but Apple and Samsung and all of the other ODMs need to do then the same. And I completely agree, Ira. I think unless we get this change, unless we get this focus, we are going to be back here going, this is a badly polluted channel. They are moving because there is less protection on RCS.
A effective way of stopping it, because that happens after it's already been polluted. So we can't rely on the fact that there'll be enough spam reports to Google that Google will tell the operators to block the numbers. So it's not going to be effective.
Yeah, I agree. We have to start recognizing that this is a change in security stats. This is not just SMS 2.0 where everyone carries on doing the same thing with the same roles, with the same architecture. It has changed. Fantastic. I think I'm over time. Thank you, everyone.